So, let's talk about something huge. Who am I in a broken world? This is all about Muslim identity psychology. We're going to tackle one of the biggest questions out there. Who are you? And we're going to look at two totally different ways to answer it. Is your identity something you have to build from the ground up? Something that's always changing? Or is it something you just have to discover, something that's already there, permanent and super deep-rooted?
Seriously, think about it for a second. Who are you? It sounds so simple, right? But these days, wow, the answer feels anything but. It's like the question that defines our entire lives, and the way we answer it, well, that changes everything. So let's get into it.
And I think a lot of us can feel this, right? This pressure. Our sense of who we are can feel, well, kind of fragile. It's like the answer changes with every new trend, every notification on our phone, every expectation people put on us. It feels like we're constantly chasing after the next thing. Social approval, that perfect life online, and it can leave you feeling, I don't know, kind of empty inside.
So that brings us to the big question we're tackling today. What if identity wasn't something you have to invent, but something you just uncover? Think about it. Is your self like a blank canvas where you've got to figure out what to paint all on your own? Or is it more like you're on an archaeological dig, and your job is just to brush away all the dirt and find this amazing thing that was there the whole time? Let's start by looking at that first idea, the blank canvas.
All right, Section 1, identity as a social construct, or what we're calling the modern view. So for the most part, contemporary psychology looks at identity as something we build piece by piece over our lifetime. It's not something you're just born with. Nope, it's a project, a full-on, lifelong construction job that gets shaped by everything, our experiences, our choices, and definitely the world around us.
You've probably heard of this idea, maybe from a psych class. It comes from a psychologist named Erik Erikson, who talked about identity versus role confusion. This is that classic teenage phase, right? Where we're basically testing out different versions of ourselves, trying on different hats to see which one fits. But here's the kicker. What happens when the hats society wants you to wear totally clash with the values you grew up with, from your family or your faith? Well, that creates what experts call identity dissonance, and it's exactly what it sounds like, a really stressful, deep-down conflict about who you're even supposed to be.
And that idea builds into something else, called social identity theory. The gist is pretty simple. A huge part of our sense of I actually comes from our sense of we. We define ourselves by the groups we're a part of, our nationality, our favorite sports team, our political party, whatever. And lately, this has evolved into what we call identity politics, where our whole worldview can get wrapped up in these group membership.
Okay, so this brings us to a really fascinating and kind of scary concept from the sociologist Zygmunt Bauman. He called it liquid identity. The idea is that our modern identity is, well, liquid. It's totally fluid, constantly changing and shape-shifting based on the latest digital trends or how many likes our last post got. Your value isn't something solid anymore, it's just trending. And that constant pressure to keep up, to adapt, to not get canceled, man, it can create some serious anxiety. It leaves you feeling like you're standing on shaky ground.
All right, let's hit the brakes and switch gears completely. Let's look at a totally different way of thinking about this. Welcome to Identity as a Spiritual Return, the Islamic framework. Here, the entire game changes. You don't invent yourself. You remember yourself. Identity isn't a construction project. It's a homecoming.
So this whole framework starts with a core concept called the fitrah. Think of it as your soul's factory settings. It's the Islamic belief that every single one of us is born with this pure, innate nature, a kind of pre-installed spiritual compass that's naturally inclined toward the divine, toward goodness. So finding yourself isn't about becoming someone new. It's about getting rid of all the junk, all the noise, and getting back to that original, pure state you started with. You're not starting from scratch, you're starting from a place of purity.
And this idea goes even deeper. It's anchored in something called the mitak, or the covenant. This is the belief that before our physical bodies ever existed, all of our souls together made a promise. They acknowledged God as their Lord. So what does that mean for us now? It means life isn't about inventing who you are. The whole journey is about remembering that promise and returning to that original connection.
And this isn't some solo journey either. It's also deeply collective. That's where the concept of the Ummah comes in. This connects a Muslim's identity to a global transnational community, a family that crosses every border, every race, every social class. It provides this incredible sense of belonging that's not based on where you live or what you look like, but on a shared faith and a shared purpose.
So what holds this identity together? Well, Islamic scholars point to a few core components that act like pillars. You've got the creed, the Aqidah. You've got the Arabic language. You've got a whole system of values and morals. There's a shared history that spans centuries. And of course, that collective geography, the entire Muslim world. All of these together create this really solid foundation for who you are.
Okay, so we've laid out two very different maps for finding the self. One is all about inventing, the other is all about discovering. Now, let's do a direct comparison. Let's put them side by side and really see how different these two paths are.
So check this out. The contrast is pretty stark. Let's just go down the list. Source. Where does your identity come from? Is it your internal feelings and what other people think of you on social media? Or is it from divine revelation and that innate fitrah we talked about? How about stability? Is your identity fluid, changing with every cultural trend? Or is it permanent, rooted in an eternal soul? Then there's the goal. Is the point just self-expression and being authentic to your current feelings? Or is it about self-purification, or tazkiyah? And finally, the big one, validation. Who are you trying to please? Is it likes, followers, and your friends? Or is it the pleasure of Allah, Rida?
All right, let's bring this all together with a final section, found versus invented. And to do that, I want to use a really powerful metaphor that I think perfectly sums up these two ways of looking at the self. Let's call it the tree of self.
There's this quote that just nails it. In a world that tells you to invent yourself every 6 months, there is a profound peace in being found. Just think about that for a second. That constant pressure to reinvent yourself, it's exhausting, right? But this other perspective says, hey, you don't have to build it all from scratch. You are already created with a blueprint. It suggests your value isn't something that's trending, it's eternal.
So, let's go back to our metaphor. Is the self just a leaf tossed around by the winds of change, fragile, disconnected from its source, just blowing wherever the latest social trend, cultural pressure, or need for validation takes it? Or is the self more like a tree, with roots that go deep, deep down into the eternal, into that fitrah, an identity that's stable, that draws its strength from a divine source? It's still growing, for sure, but its branches are reaching up, toward the hereafter, towards something much bigger than just this world. So, at the end of the day, the question really comes down to this. Is your identity a leaf or a tree? Both of these frameworks are out there, offering powerful ways to make sense of who we are in this crazy, complex world. The final question, well, it isn't for me to answer. It's for you to think about. In your own search for who you are, which one feels more true? A leaf or a tree?